The sulfur smell hit me the moment I stepped through my front door that Tuesday evening, sharp and acrid in my nostrils, making my eyes water. I dropped my purse on the hallway table and stood frozen, listening to the faint hissing sound coming from somewhere near the kitchen. My pulse hammered in my ears as I backed toward the door, fumbling for my phone with trembling fingers. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story today. I am curious, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below. All right, let us dive into what happened to me. The gas company truck arrived within 12 minutes. I watched from my front lawn, arms wrapped around myself despite the August heat, as the technician, a stocky man with a clipboard, rushed inside wearing a mask and carrying equipment. He emerged 20 minutes later, his face grim beneath his protective gear. He gestured for me to follow him back inside, and I forced my legs to move across the threshold. "Ma'am, you've got 3 connections partially loosened." He pointed to the stove, then crouched down to show me the water heater in the utility closet. "This one here especially. Another day, maybe 2, and you'd have been in serious trouble." My knees buckled. I gripped the doorframe, my knuckles white against the painted wood. Could it have been an earthquake? Some kind of settling? He shook his head slowly, his jaw tight. "These are manual fittings. Someone used a wrench on them. Recently, too, judging by the fresh scratches on the metal." The room tilted. I sank onto the hallway floor, my back against the wall, trying to process his words. Someone had deliberately loosened the gas connections in my home. Someone had tried to kill me. The technician's radio crackled with static as he called in his report, his voice distant and distorted through the ringing in my ears. I thought back through the past 2 weeks. My son Marcus had visited 4 times, more than usual. Each visit, he'd insisted I go out for errands with him, leaving the house for hours at a time. He'd suggested long drives to stores on the other side of town when closer options existed. He'd asked to borrow tools from my garage, specifically requesting my wrench set. My stomach churned. I pressed my palms flat against the cool, hardwood floor, grounding myself in something solid and real. The technician tightened all the connections and tested every line in the house. He left me with paperwork and a warning to call the police. I sat at my kitchen table for an hour after he drove away, staring at the yellow carbon copy form, watching my hands shake so badly the paper rattled. Marcus's face filled my mind. My only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died, the man I'd sacrificed everything for. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my recent calls. 5 from Marcus in the last 3 days alone. Each time asking when I'd be home, what my schedule looked like, whether I was planning to cook dinner. I stood and walked to my bedroom, my legs unsteady beneath me. The floorboards creaked with each step, sounds I'd known for 30 years suddenly unfamiliar and threatening. My jewelry box sat on the dresser where it always had, the carved wooden lid my late husband had made still smooth under my fingertips. I lifted it open and pushed aside the cheap costume pieces until I found the false bottom. The insurance policy lay underneath, crisp and official. $200,000. Marcus was the sole beneficiary. I'd updated it 6 months ago when he'd suggested I review my finances, sitting right here in this bedroom, while he pointed out how old my previous policy was. My breath caught. I set the document on the bed and moved to my closet, pulling down the shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were bank statements I'd kept because something hadn't felt right about them. 3 withdrawals Marcus had made using my debit card when I'd asked him to pick up groceries. Each withdrawal was for $200 more than the receipts he'd brought back. I'd noticed, but said nothing, telling myself He probably needed the money and was too proud to ask. The phone rang. Marcus's name lit up the screen. I stared at it through 4 rings before answering, forcing my voice to sound normal even as my free hand gripped the edge of the dresser. "Hey, baby. Mom, just checking on you." "You sound tired." His voice was warm, concerned. The same voice that had called me from college when he was homesick. The same voice that had sobbed at his father's funeral. I looked at my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. My face had gone gray, my eyes too wide. "I'm fine, just resting." "Good. I was thinking I'd come by tonight. Bring you some dinner from that place you like." My throat constricted. The insurance paperwork lay spread across my bed behind me, visible in the mirror's reflection. I turned away from it, focusing on the framed photos on my dresser. Marcus at 10, gap-toothed and grinning. Marcus at graduation, his arm around my shoulders. Marcus last Christmas, holding up the expensive watch I'd bought him even though my fixed income barely stretched that far. "Actually, I'm going out tonight. Already made plans." Silence on the other end. I counted 5 heartbeats before he spoke again. "Oh? Where are you going?" The question felt like a trap. I sat down hard on my bed, the mattress springs protesting. Through my bedroom window, I could see Mrs. Patterson across the street watering her roses, normal life continuing while mine fractured into pieces. Just out with some friends from church. Which friends? My jaw clenched. In 42 years of being his mother, he'd never questioned my plans like this, never pushed for details with that edge in his voice. I stood again, unable to sit still, and paced to the window. My reflection ghosted in the glass, translucent and insubstantial. "I'll call you tomorrow, Marcus." I ended the call before he could respond and immediately powered off the phone. My hands were shaking again, worse than before. I grabbed my purse from the hook by the door and rifled through it until I found the business card the gas technician had left. Detective Services Division printed in neat block letters with a number to call for suspected tampering cases. The card bent between my trembling fingers. I set it on the kitchen counter and braced my hands on either side of the sink, head bowed, eyes closed. The faucet dripped, once, twice, 3 times, each drop echoing in the silent house. How many times had Marcus stood in this exact spot, helping with dishes, talking about his job struggles and his money problems? How many times had I offered him cash, opened my wallet, my home, my life to him? I pushed away from the sink and grabbed my coat from the hall closet, the wool rough against my palms. My body was making decisions my mind couldn't process yet. The car keys felt cold and foreign in my grip as I locked the front door behind me, testing the handle twice before walking down the porch steps. The evening air carried the scent of cut grass and charcoal grills. Normal. Everything looked so goddamn normal. I climbed into my sedan, my knees protesting the movement. 64 years old, and every joint suddenly felt ancient, like my body was aging in real time with each new betrayal. The engine turned over on the second try. I sat there in the driveway, hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Where was I even going? The church wouldn't open for another hour. My sister lived 3 states away. My friends, the handful I had left after retirement, they were Marcus's godmothers, women who'd watched him grow up, who'd never believed their golden boy could do this. A flash of movement caught my eye. Marcus's blue pickup truck turned onto my street, 3 blocks down, but unmistakable. That dent in the front bumper from 2 summers ago. The faded parking permit still stuck to the windshield. My heart slammed against my ribcage. He wasn't supposed to be here. He'd said he was at work, said he couldn't talk long. I watched him slow down as he approached. Watched him see my car in the driveway, with me sitting inside it. He pulled up to the curb in front of my house and killed his engine. For 5 seconds, neither of us moved. We just sat there, in our separate vehicles, 30 feet apart, staring at each other through 2 windshields. I shifted into reverse. My tires squealed as I backed out fast, jerking the wheel to swing around. He was already out of his truck, one hand raised, his mouth forming words I couldn't hear through my closed windows. I punched the accelerator, shooting forward past him. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the middle of the street, both arms extended now like he could pull me back through sheer will. My speedometer climbed, 35, 40, 45, in a residential zone. I forced my foot to ease up, forced my breathing to slow. Getting pulled over wouldn't help anything. 3 blocks away, I turned right onto Maple without signaling, then left onto 5th, then right again, making random turns until I was sure he wasn't following. I ended up in the parking lot of the abandoned Kmart on Highway 9. The cracked asphalt stretched empty in all directions, weeds pushing through every gap. The building's windows were covered with plywood, graffiti tags spelling out names of kids who probably didn't even live here anymore. I cut the engine and sat in the silence. My phone was still powered off in my purse. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting everything orange and purple, beautiful and terrible at the same time. My hands found the steering wheel again, gripping until my knuckles went white. I imagined Marcus in my house last Tuesday when I'd gone to my doctor's appointment. I saw him in my mind, kneeling by the water heater in the basement, his hands on the gas connection, deliberately loosening it. Not enough to cause an immediate explosion. Just enough for a slow leak, for gas to seep through the house while I slept. A sound came out of my throat, part sob, part rage. I slammed my palms against the steering wheel once, twice, 3 times. The horn blared into the empty lot, and I hit it again, harder, until my hands ached. The life insurance policy, $200,000. He was the sole beneficiary because his father had died 15 years ago, because there was no one else. I'd updated it just last year, increased the amount, because Marcus had mentioned wanting to buy a house, start fresh, get his life together. My phone. I needed to call someone, but who? The police? And tell them what? That my son had tried to kill me? That I had proof from a gas technician but no real evidence, no witnesses, nothing but a mother's sick certainty? I dug through my purse with shaking hands and powered on the phone. It buzzed immediately with 3 missed calls, all from Marcus. Then a text appeared, then another, then 5 more in rapid succession. Mom, where are you? We need to talk. I'm worried about you. Please answer, Mom. I'm coming to find you. I'm calling the police if you don't respond. The threats were barely veiled now. I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. Another text arrived. This isn't like you. Are you having some kind of episode? My finger hovered over the screen, trembling so violently I almost dropped the phone. An episode. He was already building his narrative, planting seeds for later. The concerned son, the unstable mother having delusions. I could see it unfolding like a courtroom drama. Her mental state had deteriorated, Your Honor. She was paranoid, imagining things. I turned off the phone completely, yanked out the battery for good measure. The plastic casing cracked under the pressure of my fingernails. Better. He couldn't track me if the phone was dead. The mall parking lot had begun to fill with evening shoppers. Families emerged from minivans, teenagers clustered near the food court entrance. Normal people living normal lives, none of them fleeing from their own children. I slumped lower in my seat, pulling the visor down to hide my face. Think. I needed to think. My sister Pauline lived 2 hours north in Philadelphia. We hadn't spoken in 8 months, not since that argument about her husband's drinking. But blood was blood. She'd let me crash on her couch, wouldn't she? Except Marcus knew where she lived. He'd been there for Christmas 4 years ago, remembered the neighborhood. The church. Pastor Williams had always said his door was open day or night for anyone in crisis. But he'd known Marcus since childhood, had watched him grow up in the youth choir. Would he even believe me? Or would he do what everyone always did? Defend the boy, question the mother, suggest family counseling and prayer circles. I caught my reflection in the rear-view mirror. My hair had come loose from its usual neat bun, gray strands sticking to my damp forehead. Dark circles hollowed out my eyes. I looked exactly like someone having an episode. A knock on the passenger window sent my heart into my throat. A security guard peered in, his flashlight beam cutting through the gathering dusk. He made a rolling motion with his hand, indicating I should lower the window. My fingers fumbled with the controls, and the glass slid down 2 inches. "Evening, ma'am. You doing okay?" "Fine. Just resting before I head inside." He swept the flashlight across the interior of my car, the scattered contents of my purse, the broken phone pieces on the passenger seat, my white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. His expression shifted from casual concern to something more alert. "Been here about an hour now. Some folks reported someone sitting in their car, looking distressed." An hour? Time had dissolved into nothing. I forced my face into what I hoped resembled a smile, though my cheeks felt stiff as plaster. Shopping mall gave me anxiety, needed to collect myself. "You sure there's nothing?" A silver Honda Civic pulled into the space 3 rows ahead. My lungs seized. Marcus drove a silver Honda, but this one disgorged a young couple with shopping bags, laughing about something on their phone. Not him, not yet. The guard was still watching me, one hand resting near the radio clipped to his belt. If he called it in, if there was any kind of report, Marcus would find out. He had friends in the police department. Jerome from high school worked dispatch, would probably mention it casually. "Hey, your mom okay?" They found her at the mall, acting strange. "I'm leaving now." I started the engine to prove it, gripping the key so hard the metal teeth bit into my palm. "Thank you for checking." He stepped back slowly, still uncertain, but protocol didn't cover middle-aged women sitting in parking lots. I backed out carefully, fighting every instinct that screamed at me to floor the accelerator and rocket toward the exit. Normal. Act normal. The streets blurred past. Strip malls and gas stations and neighborhoods where lights glowed warm in kitchen windows. I drove without direction, turning randomly at intersections, doubling back on myself, creating a pattern that couldn't be tracked or predicted. On Maple Street, I passed my former neighbor Rita's house. She'd moved to Arizona last year after her husband died, but her daughter might still have her number. Rita had always been kind, had brought me casserole after casserole when my husband passed. But that was 15 years ago. Too long, too much to explain. The tank gauge hovered near empty. I'd need gas soon, and gas meant using my credit card, which meant a digital trail Marcus could follow if he was desperate enough, if he'd already reported me missing, if he'd convinced anyone I was the danger rather than him. I pulled into a gas station off the highway, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and cracked concrete that suggested they didn't invest much in security cameras. My hands trembled as I slid the credit card into the reader. Each second waiting for approval felt like an eternity. Marcus could be tracking this right now, could see the exact location pop up on some banking app on his phone. The pump clicked to life. I squeezed the handle, watching the numbers roll over with agonizing slowness. A pickup truck pulled up to the opposite pump, and a man in a Carhartt jacket climbed out, nodding at me with that reflexive politeness strangers offer at gas stations. I forced my face into something resembling a smile, then turned my attention back to the numbers. 12 gallons. 13. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I nearly dropped the nozzle. The screen showed Marcus's name above 3 words. Mom, where are you? Not a question, a demand. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, muscle memory almost taking over before I stopped myself. He'd taught me to respond immediately, had trained me over years to answer his calls, his texts, his questions without hesitation. Good mothers stayed connected. Good mothers didn't make their sons worry. The pump clicked off at 15 gallons. I replaced the nozzle with mechanical precision, screwed on the gas cap, climbed back into the driver's seat. The phone buzzed again, then again. I turned it off completely. The highway stretched north toward Pennsylvania, south toward Virginia, west into the Appalachian darkness. I chose west, taking the exit that led away from populated areas, into regions where strip malls gave way to farmland and the occasional shuttered factory. The kind of landscape where people minded their own business. 20 miles out, I spotted a motel with a vacancy sign, glowing red against the night sky. The Starlight Inn, though no stars were visible through the cloud cover, and the building's cracked siding suggested it had seen better decades. Perfect. I pulled into the gravel lot, counting only 3 other vehicles. A semi-truck, a sedan with out-of-state plates, a motorcycle covered with a tarp. The office smelled like cigarette smoke and air freshener fighting a losing battle. Behind the desk sat a woman in her 30s with bleached hair and reading glasses on a chain, watching something on a small television mounted in the corner. She glanced up without much interest. Need a room for the night? Yes, just one night. She pulled out a registration form and a pen attached to the counter with a beaded chain. I hesitated over the name line, then wrote, Sarah Collins. My mother's maiden name combined with my high school best friend's last name. The pen felt heavy in my grip. $72, cash or card. I had maybe $40 in my wallet. The rest was in my checking account, which meant using the card again, creating another digital breadcrumb for Marcus to follow. But standing here arguing about it, drawing attention, was worse. Card. She ran it through the machine without comment, handed me a physical key attached to a green plastic diamond with 12 printed on it. Not even a key card, an actual brass key that probably opened a door with a physical lock Marcus couldn't hack remotely. Checkout's at 11. Continental breakfast starts at 6, but the coffee maker's been broken since Tuesday. I took the key and walked back out into the night. Room 12 was at the far end, facing the woods that pressed close against the property line. The door stuck when I tried to open it, swollen from humidity or age, and I had to shoulder it hard to make it give way. Inside smelled like old carpet and industrial cleaner. A double bed with a floral comforter that had seen thousands of guests. A television bolted to a pressboard dresser. A bathroom with a shower curtain covered in mildew at the bottom hem. I locked the door, threw the deadbolt, checked the window to make sure it locked too. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself shake. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I pressed them between my knees, but the tremors spread up my arms, into my shoulders, until my whole body was vibrating with the reality of what I'd discovered. Marcus had been loosening the gas connections. My own son. The boy I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through colic and ear infections and teenage heartbreak. He'd been trying to kill me, making it look like an accident. An old woman, too senile to maintain her home properly. The nausea hit hard and sudden. I made it to the bathroom just in time, kneeling on cracked linoleum while my stomach emptied itself. Afterward, I sat with my back against the bathtub, head tilted against the cold porcelain, trying to understand how I'd gotten here. The cold from the bathtub seeped through my shirt and into my spine. I hauled myself up using the sink, my knees protesting, my joints stiff from sitting on the floor. The face in the mirror looked 10 years older than it had this morning. Gray undertones beneath brown skin, eyes bloodshot and hollow. I splashed water on my face, rinsed my mouth, tried to wash away the acid taste. My reflection wavered in the spotted glass. Behind me, the shower curtain hung motionless, but I could see Marcus there anyway, 23 years old, walking through my kitchen with tools in his hand, telling me he was fixing the stove to save me money on a repairman. The memory made my stomach lurch again. I gripped the sink edge until the porcelain bit into my palms. Back in the main room, I pulled my phone from my purse with shaking fingers. 3 missed calls, all from the same number. Marcus. I stared at the screen until it went dark, then set the phone face down on the nightstand like it might bite me. Sleep was impossible. I lay on top of the comforter fully clothed, staring at the ceiling tiles with their water stains shaped like continents. Every creak of the building made my pulse spike. Every car passing on the highway sent headlights sweeping across the wall. Around 3 a.m, voices rose from the room next door. A man and woman arguing about money, about someone named Travis who'd stolen a truck. The woman's voice climbed higher and higher until something crashed against the wall. Then silence. I counted the holes in the ceiling tiles. Tried to remember prayers from childhood. Watched the digital clock advance one glowing number at a time. Dawn came gray and reluctant through the thin curtains. I sat up, every muscle protesting, and checked my phone. 7 missed calls now, 2 voicemails. I deleted them without listening. The continental breakfast was set up in a room off the lobby. Stale pastries under plastic wrap. A coffee maker that wheezed and dripped brown liquid into a stained carafe. I filled a styrofoam cup anyway, just to have something to hold. The coffee tasted like burned water. Only one other person occupied the breakfast area. A white man in his 50s, wearing a suit that had seen better days, spreading peanut butter on a bagel with a plastic knife. He glanced up when I entered, then returned to his task with methodical precision. I took my coffee to a corner table and pulled out my phone again. My hands had steadied some, enough to navigate to my banking app. The joint account I shared with Marcus showed recent transactions. Gas stations, grocery stores, nothing unusual. But when I checked my individual savings account, the one I'd set up 40 years ago when I started working at the hospital, my breath caught. $5,000 withdrawn last Tuesday, another $3,000 on Friday. The authorization showed my account number, my PIN, my signature on file. The coffee cup crumpled in my grip, hot liquid spilling across my hand. I jerked back, chair scraping loud against linoleum. The man in the suit looked over, paused mid-chew. "You all right?" "Fine." The word came out strangled. I grabbed napkins from the dispenser, mopped at my hand, the table, my jeans. Burns were already forming, angry red patches across my knuckles and palm. In the bathroom, I ran cold water over the burns, watching my skin turn mottled and tight. $8,000. I'd been saving for years, putting away 50 here, 100 there, emergency money for when Social Security wasn't enough. Money Marcus knew about because I'd told him. Proud of my thrift, my planning ahead. Money he'd stolen while loosening gas connections to kill me faster. My phone buzzed against my hip. Another call. I yanked it from my pocket. Marcus again. This time, I answered. "Mom, where are you? I've been calling all night." "How long?" My voice came out flat, dead. "How long have you been stealing from me?" Silence on the other end. Then, "What are you talking about?" $8,000? From my savings. My account that you helped me set up online banking for last month. More silence. In the background, I could hear morning television, the weather report I usually watched while making breakfast. "Mom, listen." I ended the call, turned off the phone completely. Stood there watching water swirl down the drain, taking heat and pain and 37 years of motherhood with it. Back in my room, I spread everything from my purse across the bed. Wallet with $43 cash, credit card with a $500 limit, car keys, a checkbook for an account that probably had $200 left after this month's bills. Driver's license showing a smiling woman who no longer existed. The maid knocked at 10:30, called through the door in accented English. "Come back later," I managed. Her cart squeaked away down the concrete walkway. I needed a plan. Needed to think clearly, logically, the way I'd done during 30 years of nursing. Assess the situation, prioritize interventions, execute with precision. But my mind kept circling back to Marcus at 6 years old, crying because he'd fallen off his bike. Marcus at 15, suspended from school for fighting, swearing he'd been defending a smaller kid. Marcus at 19, dropping out of community college, promising he'd find his path. Just needed time. The afternoon sun turned the motel room into an oven. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone I'd powered back on, watching notifications pile up. 14 missed calls, 23 text messages, all from Marcus. My fingers moved across the screen, deleting each message unread. The repetitive motion felt cleansing, like peeling away layers of rot. When the last notification disappeared, I opened my banking app and studied the damage again. The transfers had been small at first, 200 here, 300 there, gradually increasing until the final gutting. $4,000 withdrawn in a single transaction 3 days ago. While I'd been working double shifts to rebuild my retirement fund after the pandemic had decimated it, I stood and paced the narrow space between bed and bathroom, my shoes sticking to carpet that felt damp despite the desert heat outside. The credit card statement from 2 months ago burned in my memory now. A charge from a hardware store I'd questioned Marcus about. He'd said he was picking up supplies for his landlord, doing handyman work for rent reduction. I'd believed him. Wanted to believe him. The hardware store charge was for $247. My phone buzzed. Not Marcus this time, an unknown local number. I let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to the message with the device pressed hard against my ear. "Ms. Gibson, this is Detective Patricia Morales with the police department. Your son filed a missing person report this morning. I'd appreciate a call back to confirm your well-being. You're not in any trouble. We just need to verify you're safe." I saved the number, but didn't call back yet. Instead, I pulled out my laptop, the 8-year-old Dell that took 3 minutes to boot up. While it wheezed to life, I retrieved the small, fireproof box from my suitcase, the one Marcus didn't know I kept in my bedroom closet behind the winter coats. Inside were copies of everything. Deed to the house, last year's tax returns, insurance policies, my late husband's death certificate from 2018, and underneath it all, the folder I'd been adding to for the past 3 months, ever since I'd started feeling uneasy. The first page showed my natural gas bill from June, higher than usual, but I'd attributed it to a malfunctioning water heater. The second page was July's bill, 30% higher still. August had climbed another $45. I'd finally called the utility company, and they'd sent a technician who found nothing wrong with my appliances. But he'd mentioned something else. Mentioned it casually, the way people do when they think you already know. Said the loose connection behind my stove was dangerous, could have caused a leak. Said I was lucky my detectors were working. Did I hear them going off at all? I hadn't, because the batteries had been dead in both detectors, which I'd discovered only after he left. My hands shook as I turned to the next page. A printout from a true crime forum I'd stumbled across during a sleepless night. A thread discussing inheritance fraud, methods people used. One comment, posted by a retired fire investigator, detailed how gas leaks could be staged to look accidental. How carbon monoxide deaths often went undetected initially. How grieving family members rarely faced scrutiny when elderly parents died in their sleep. The laptop finally loaded. I logged into my email and created a new folder, methodically forwarding every bank statement, every utility bill, every piece of evidence. Then I drafted a message to the email address listed on Detective Morales' voicemail. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This wasn't just reporting theft anymore. This was accusing my son of something that made my stomach turn liquid, that made the room tilt sideways even though I was sitting down. I typed anyway. Detailed the financial theft, the gas connection discovery, the dead detector batteries. Attached the documents. My vision blurred twice and I had to stop, press my palms against my eyes until the spinning stopped. The email sat in drafts, unsent. A crash outside made me jolt. Someone's luggage cart had tipped over in the parking lot. Through the gap in the curtains, I watched a family scramble to collect scattered belongings. A small boy crying over a broken toy. The father knelt on the hot asphalt, trying to fit the pieces back together, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. My phone rang again. Marcus this time. I answered before I could reconsider. Mom, Jesus Christ, where are you? I've been losing my mind. I know what you did. My voice came out steady, cold. All of it. The line went silent, except for his breathing, quick and shallow. The money was just the beginning, wasn't it? Mom, I don't know what you think happened, but the gas line, the detector batteries. More silence, longer this time. Then, Mom, you need to come home. You're not thinking clearly. The stress, maybe early dementia. We should see your doctor. I ended the call, returned to my laptop. Hit send on the email to Detective Morales before I could stop myself. The confirmation message appeared. Delivered. I closed the laptop and lay back on the bed, staring at water stains on the ceiling that looked like continents on a map. My chest felt tight, ribs constricting around lungs that wouldn't fully inflate. The air conditioner rattled and wheezed, circulating the same stale air, and I thought about other things that circulated invisibly, odorlessly. Thought about waking up groggy every morning for the past 3 weeks, attributing it to age and work stress. Thought about the headaches that mysteriously improved when I picked up extra shifts, spending more time away from home. Thought about how close I'd come to never waking up at all. Block 8. I woke to headlights sweeping across the motel room ceiling. The digital clock read 2:47 a.m. My body knew before my mind caught up. The recognition that lives in prey animals. The cellular understanding that something dangerous has found you. The engine cut off. A car door opened, but didn't close. Footsteps on gravel, deliberate and measured. I rolled off the bed onto my knees, reaching for my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up. No missed calls, no texts. Nothing official. My fingers trembled as I pulled up the recent call log, found Detective Morales' number. My thumb hovered over it. A knock. 3 sharp raps that made my ribcage contract. "Mom, I know you're in there." Marcus's voice carried through the hollow core door like it was made of paper. I stayed on my knees beside the bed, phone clutched against my chest. The carpet smelled like decades of cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. I could see the shadow of his feet in the gap beneath the door, blocking the yellow security light from the parking lot. "Your car's right there?" The clerk told me which room. Another knock, harder this time. "We need to talk about what you think you know." I stood slowly, joints protesting, moved toward the bathroom, away from the door. The window above the toilet was small, probably too small, but I slid the lock and pushed. It opened with a grinding screech that seemed to fill the entire night. The doorknob rattled. "Don't do this, Mom. Don't make me—" He stopped himself, started again. "I'm your son." "I would never hurt you." My laugh came out strangled, desperate. I grabbed my purse from the bathroom counter, slung it across my body. Pushed the window screen. It resisted, then popped free and clattered onto the concrete outside. The opening was barely 18 inches wide. I'd have to go head first. Something hit the door. Not a knock, a shoulder, a full body impact. The frame splintered, but held. I hoisted myself onto the toilet tank, got my arms through the window. The concrete below was maybe 6 feet down, barely visible in the darkness. Broken glass glittered near a dumpster 10 yards away. I pushed forward, forcing my shoulders through. The window frame scraped across my back, catching on my shirt. My purse swung forward and smacked against the exterior wall. Another impact on the door. Wood cracking, the security chains singing with tension. I wiggled through up to my waist, gravity beginning to take over. My phone slipped from my pocket and hit the concrete with a sharp crack. I grabbed the exterior window frame and pulled, dragging my hips through. My legs followed, and I went down hard, landing on my shoulder and rolling into the building's foundation. Pain shot through my collarbone and down my arm in white-hot branches. Inside, the door gave way. I heard it slam against the interior wall. Heard Marcus's breathing, elevated and ragged. I grabbed my phone, screen spiderwebbed but still glowing, and ran. Barefoot across gravel and broken pavement, around the corner of the motel toward the front office. The night clerk had been asleep when I'd arrived, but there would be lights, people, witnesses, footsteps behind me. Running now. Not trying to hide it anymore. "Mom, stop!" The office lights were off. A chain-link fence separated the motel property from an auto repair shop next door. I veered toward it, my feet screaming against the rough ground. Hit the fence at full speed and started climbing. The metal rattled and sang. My fingers found purchase in the diamond-shaped gaps. I pulled myself up 3 feet, 4 feet, 5. A hand closed around my ankle. I kicked, connected with something solid. Heard Marcus grunt, and his grip loosened enough for me to yank free. I hauled myself over the top of the fence, ignoring the barbed wire that sliced through my palm. Blood made everything slippery. I dropped to the other side and landed in a crouch among car parts and oil drums. The fence shook as he started climbing. I ran through the repair shop lot, weaving between vehicles in various states of disassembly. A transmission on a pallet. Stacks of used tires. My shoulder throbbed where I'd landed, and my hand left blood smears on everything I touched for balance. Ahead, a street. Sodium vapor lights casting everything in sick orange. A car passed. Didn't slow. Didn't see. I reached the sidewalk and looked back. Marcus dropped from the fence, landed smoothly. He'd always been athletic. Used to play basketball before the addiction. before everything that came after. He started walking toward me, not running anymore. The orange light made his face look hollow, unfamiliar. "You sent that email?" Not a question. "Morales called me an hour ago, asked me to come in tomorrow for questions." I backed toward the street. A semi-truck roared past, engine braking, and the wind from it nearly knocked me over. "That's why you're here." My voice sounded strange, disconnected. "Not to talk, to fix your problem." He stepped off the curb, kept coming. I turned and sprinted into the street without looking. Horns blared. Tires squealed. A sedan swerved so close the mirror clipped my jacket and spun me sideways. I stumbled, but kept moving, reaching the opposite curb as headlights illuminated everything in harsh white clarity. Behind me, Marcus had stopped at the street's edge. Traffic flowed between us like a river, 5 lanes of metal and speed and noise that separated predator from prey. My chest heaved. Blood dripped from my hand onto the concrete, making dark spots that looked black under the sodium lights. He watched me from across the divide. Just watched. His face expressionless in that way I'd seen too many times before, when the drugs had worn off but the damage remained, when the sun I'd raised existed somewhere beneath layers of choices I couldn't undo. A delivery truck passed. When it cleared, he was walking away. Not toward his car. Just walking, shoulders hunched, hands in pockets, disappearing into the shadows between streetlights like he was dissolving into the city itself. I stood there until my legs stopped shaking, until the adrenaline drained and left only the throbbing pain in my shoulder and the burning slice across my palm. A 24-hour convenience store glowed 2 blocks down. I walked toward it, each step careful, deliberate. My phone was still in my pocket, still recording, still connected to Detective Morales' voicemail, which meant somewhere a digital file was capturing everything: the chase, the admission, the sounds of attempted violence. The store's fluorescent lights made me squint. A kid behind the counter, maybe 19, looked up from his phone. His eyes widened at whatever he saw in my face. "Bathroom?" My voice came out rough. He pointed to the back without speaking. I locked the bathroom door and leaned against it. The mirror showed someone I barely recognized. Hair wild, face streaked with dirt and sweat, jacket torn at the shoulder. I turned on the faucet and ran cold water over my bleeding palm. The cut wasn't as deep as I'd feared. The barbed wire had sliced rather than gouged. I pressed paper towels against it until the bleeding slowed to a seep. My phone showed the recording had stopped 3 minutes ago. Battery at 4%. I called Morales directly. He answered on the second ring despite the late hour. He came to my house. I spoke before he could. I ran. He followed. It's all recorded. Everything he said, everything he did. Morales' voice sharpened instantly. "Where are you now?" "Convenience store. Corner of Patterson and 5th. I gave him the cross streets from a sign visible through the bathroom's high window. "I'm okay, but you need to find him before—" "Stay there. Officers are 3 minutes out. I'm coming too." The call ended. I wetted more paper towels and cleaned my face, my neck, the scratches on my arms from the fence climb. Each injury cataloged itself. Bruises forming, muscles stiffening. The deep ache in my shoulder that suggested something wrenched, if not torn. The kid at the counter sold me a bottle of water and bandages. Didn't ask questions. I sat on the curb outside and wrapped my hand properly, pulling the bandage tight enough to hold the wound closed. The street had quieted. Occasional cars passed, but most of the city slept. unaware that in dark houses and shadowed lots, families destroyed themselves in slow motion. Red and blue lights appeared in the distance, growing brighter. 2 patrol cars pulled into the lot. 4 officers emerged, hands near their belts, scanning the area with practiced efficiency before approaching me. One I recognized from the station, Officer Chen, who'd taken my initial report about the gas leak. "Mrs. Gibson." She crouched beside me, keeping her voice low. "Can you tell me what happened?" I told her everything. She recorded it on a body camera, while her partner called dispatch with a description of Marcus and his last known direction. The other 2 officers searched the surrounding blocks in their vehicle, lights dark now, hunting. Detective Morales arrived 15 minutes later in an unmarked sedan. He'd thrown a jacket over what looked like pajamas, and his hair stood up on one side like he'd been sleeping. He listened to my account again, taking notes in a small leather notebook, stopping me occasionally to clarify details. Exact words spoken, physical actions, the sequence of events. "The recording uploads automatically to cloud storage," I told him. "Even with my phone dead, it's saved." He nodded. "We'll get a warrant tonight." Everything he said about Detective Morales calling him, about you sending that email, it establishes consciousness of guilt. Combined with the physical assault, the chase, we have enough to arrest him for attempted murder. The words sat heavy in the air between us. Attempted murder. My son, the baby I'd carried and birthed and raised, who'd learned to walk holding my fingers, who'd laughed at cartoons and brought me dandelions from the yard. "Officers found his car abandoned 4 blocks from here," Morales continued. "We've issued a bolo. He won't get far." Block 1010. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of my new apartment, casting geometric patterns across the hardwood floor. I stretched in bed, feeling the warmth on my face, breathing deep without the phantom smell of gas that had haunted my dreams for months. The 4th-floor unit was smaller than my old house, but the windows opened easily, and the building had been inspected twice before I'd signed the lease. I padded to the kitchen in my slippers, filling the kettle with water. The click of the gas ignition used to make my stomach clench, but I'd chosen this place specifically for its electric stove. Small blue flames belonged to the past now. Steam rose from the kettle as I measured loose-leaf tea into the strainer. A Saturday morning ritual I'd reclaimed. The community garden plot, visible from my window, showed early spring growth. I'd planted tomatoes and peppers there 2 weeks ago, working the soil with my hands, letting the earth ground me. Other gardeners waved when they saw me, and I'd learned their faces without needing to know their stories. Fresh starts didn't require explanations. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from my therapist's office confirming Tuesday's appointment. I'd been going weekly since February, working through the layers of grief and betrayal that didn't dissolve with guilty verdicts. Dr. Patel had kind eyes and never pushed when I went quiet, understanding that some wounds needed silence to heal. I carried my tea to the small balcony, settling into the folding chair I'd bought at a yard sale. The city stretched out below, cars moving, people walking dogs, life continuing in its ordinary way. A plane traced white lines across the blue sky. Everything felt impossibly normal, and that normality was its own kind of miracle. The trial had ended in March. 23 years for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and a list of other charges the prosecutor had detailed over 4 days of testimony. I'd sat in the courtroom watching the son I'd raised transformed into a stranger in an orange jumpsuit, his lawyer arguing diminished capacity, financial desperation, anything to soften the inevitable. The jury had deliberated for 6 hours. I hadn't attended the sentencing. My victim impact statement had been read by the prosecutor, words I'd written and rewritten until they captured both my grief and my resolve. Some relationships couldn't survive their breaking points. Some doors, once closed, needed to stay that way. The carbon monoxide detector in my hallway chirped its monthly test. I'd installed 3 throughout the apartment, checking their batteries every Sunday without fail. My neighbor across the hall had commented on the excessive caution, and I'd smiled without explaining. Some fears were earned through experience, validated by survival. I finished my tea and went back inside to dress for my volunteer shift. The domestic violence shelter had accepted my application in April, and I spent Saturday mornings helping with intake paperwork and resource coordination. Listening to other women's stories of betrayal by people they'd trusted gave my own experience context and purpose. Survival wasn't selfish. It was the foundation for helping others survive. The bus ride took 20 minutes. I watched the neighborhoods change through the window, noting the gradual shift from residential to commercial. A mother guided her young son across the crosswalk, his small hand in hers, trusting completely. The sight squeezed something in my chest, but I breathed through it. Grief came in waves, smaller now than before, but still capable of catching me off guard. The shelter director, Patricia, greeted me at the door with her usual warm smile. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." "I'm good, thanks." I hung my jacket on the designated hook and signed the volunteer log. The morning passed in familiar tasks, filing updated restraining orders, making phone calls to housing assistance programs, sitting with a young woman while she filled out employment applications with shaking hands. Her ex-husband had sabotaged her car's brake lines. She'd discovered it only because her mechanic had been thorough. We shared a look of understanding that needed no words. Lunch break brought spring sunshine and a bench in the pocket park adjacent to the shelter. I unwrapped the sandwich I'd packed and watched pigeons peck at breadcrumbs near the fountain. My phone showed a message from my sister in Ohio, checking in like she did every few days. The family had fractured along predictable lines, some who believed I'd been too harsh, others who understood that survival sometimes meant cutting away diseased branches. I replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji and a heart. Complicated relationships deserved simple communications. The afternoon brought paperwork and phone calls until my shift ended at 4. Patricia walked me to the door, mentioning a fundraiser dinner planned for next month. "We'd love to have you there if you're comfortable." "I'll think about it," I said, and meant it. The bus ride home took me past my old neighborhood. I didn't look down the familiar streets anymore, didn't let my gaze drift toward what had been. Forward motion required facing forward, no matter how much the past wanted to pull focus. My apartment welcomed me with its quiet safety. I changed into comfortable clothes and started dinner: chicken breast, roasted vegetables, the simple meals that had become my baseline. Cooking for one had taken adjustment, but I'd learned to find peace in the solitude, to stop setting phantom places at the table. The news played low on the television while I ate. World events, weather forecasts, sports scores, the background noise of a life rebuilt from fragments. I washed dishes by hand instead of using the dishwasher, letting the warm water and repetitive motion settle my thoughts. Evening brought a book I'd been working through slowly, a mystery novel where justice arrived in predictable patterns and motivations made sense. Fiction's tidy resolutions felt comforting after reality's messier truths. I read until my eyes grew heavy, marking my place with a pressed flower from the community garden. Before bed, I checked the locks, tested the smoke detectors one more time, and stood at the window looking out at the lit city. 6 months ago, I'd been running through dark streets, chased by someone who should have protected me. Now, I stood safe in my own space, having built something new from the ruins of what was. The resilience surprised me still. Not the absence of pain, but the capacity to carry it while still moving forward. To plant gardens and help strangers and drink morning tea while watching the sunrise. To survive and then to choose deliberately to live. I climbed into bed, pulling the quilt up under my chin. Tomorrow would bring more small joys and manageable challenges. More steps forward in a journey that had no finish line, only continued motion and growth, and healing earned one difficult day at a time. My eyes closed on gratitude for second chances and the strength to claim them. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.